We continue with Amendment 39 to Clause 2, with which it will be convenient to debate Amendments 56, 4, 19, 20, 41 and 45 to Clause 2. That Clause 2 stand part of the bill, and new clauses 5 and 10. Wayne David to move the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In moving Amendments 39, 4 and 41, I just want to say a brief few remarks about the Fiscal Convention. As some members in this House will know, the Fiscal Convention is something which is quite well established. It was referred to by Lord Sewell in the debate on the Scotland Act 1998. He was then the Parliamentary and the Secretary of State for Scotland, and what he said was, and I quote exactly from that debate at the time, "We would expect a convention to be established, but Westminster would not normally legislate with regard to devolved matters in Scotland without the consent of the Scottish Parliament." That was accepted, and then the Fiscal Convention became a reality. I think it's true to say that since the enactment of that piece of legislation, as the Law Society of Scotland has said, there has been agreement that the convention has been successful. It has been adhered to by consecutive parliaments. But then, of course, we had the Smith Commission, and a firm commitment was given in the Smith Commission that the Sewell Convention be placed on a statutory footing. That was a clear, unambiguous statement. And we have, of course, the legislation in draft form being put forward by the government. And on the face of it, you might think that that is an honouring of that commitment which is given. But I would suggest that there are weaknesses in what the government has, in fact, put forward in the draft legislation. And I'd like to begin by referring to the excellent work conducted by the Political and Constitutional Reform Committee. And one of the things that has been pointed out is that the Sewell Convention has been distilled somewhat in terms of how the government has interpreted it. The clause the government has put forward in this legislation only refers to the Convention's ability in respect of devolved matters. It has been pointed out that the Convention is also applied to legislation affecting the competencies of the devolved institutions. So in some ways, because what has been happening in practice is not quite registered and recognised in the draft legislation, that is something we are concerned about, Mr. Chairman. Also, we are concerned about the way it is being put forward on a statutory footing, because, of course, those students of constitutional British history will recognise that according to the principle of Dicey, it is this British Parliament which has ultimate sovereignty, and this statutory footing recognises that constitutional reality without challenging or indeed in taking it forward with any way whatsoever. We think that is somewhat unfortunate and is certainly worthy of a debate anyhow. And in fact, the constitutional footing is that in reality it doesn't count for anything at all, because what we have essentially is a summation that the Sewell Convention is a political statement and little more than that. Indeed, it has been said by the Select Committee that what we have, as a number of experts have said, is something which is, quote, legally vacuous. Or as one academic also said, it is like a bowl of jelly. And I think that is something which we should be concerned about. It's also noteworthy, I think, that the House of Lords Constitutional Committee, which is highly regarded by many people, have also said in a rather more sedate way, and I quote them, "It can be said that the new provision will recognise the existence of the Sewell Convention rather than turn it into a legally binding principle." Now, I think that's an extremely important phrase. And for us who are committed firmly to the Sewell principle, we would recognise that as things stand, perhaps, there's no challenge to that convention, but who knows what could happen in the future. And we think that's why it's something which should be, in fact, legally binding, not just on this government, but on all future governments of any political complexion. So I think those issues need to be aired very, very fully when we consider the Sewell Convention. They are important and pretty fundamental to this piece of legislation. I'd also, Mr. Chairman, like to refer to the Human Rights Amendment, which is...
This is not some constitutional nicety here. This is about the circumstances in which the UK Parliament would be allowed to legislate on a matter covered by the Convention without the consent of the Scottish Parliament. This is something that I hope my honourable friend will press very hard on the Secretary of State. One of those issues that he might take away and have a look at the wording, because as my Political and Constitutional Reform Select Committee said, Mr. Chairman, the presence of the word normally in the Convention is clearly problematic when it comes into giving it the force of statute, and we recommend that this be addressed in any redraft of the clause. I hope my honourable friend will press that matter with the Secretary of State, and again perhaps return on report stage so that we can all be satisfied that Scottish Parliament's sovereignty is not in question.
Yes, my honourable friend has put his finger on another very important issue, which that was considered very carefully again by his committee, and that is certainly the case, because if you use the word normally, I ask you, how long is a piece of string? That is something which is legally imprecise, and it's something which is a cause for concern, and that reinforces the point that I was making earlier. So I know the Secretary of State has already given evidence to that committee, and I suspect that his response to the committee wasn't wholly acceptable to the members of the committee. So I would very much hope that he has refined and thought upon his response and is able to give a more robust answer to the questions which I am put forward today. We wait with interest to hear what he has to say on that one. But I'd also like to finally just refer to the new clause 5, which has been put forward by my honourable friend, and this refers to the application of the Human Rights Act 1998 to Scotland. One of the things which I think is constitutionally extremely important is that devolution has been to a large extent underpinned by human rights legislation, in particular the Act of 1998. That's certainly the case as far as Wales is concerned. It's extremely important as far as Northern Ireland is concerned, but it also has an important bearing as far as Scotland is concerned as well. And indeed, we've seen with the Scottish Parliament for the last few years a number of initiatives being taken with regard to human rights, and I would commend those initiatives. It's easier to do it in Scotland, of course, because there's a different legal system to England and Wales. But we've seen the Scottish Human Rights Commission publishing the Scottish National Action Plan on Human Rights. And I think whatever our political allegiances, those positive measures should be welcomed. And I would not like to see any piece of legislation not fully take those measures into account and fully take into account how devolution in Scotland rests very, very firmly on the principle of extensive and liberal human rights. And I would hope very much that the House would agree with us on that point. And if any action is taken against the Human Rights Act in whichever way or form that might be done by this government, then there shall first of all be the express consent of the Scottish Parliament. Thank you.